Hello, Mike here. Welcome to another episode of MIJ Supplemental, where we dig into the finer details of vintage Japanese guitar production. Today, we'll be exploring the origins and earliest incarnations of Tokai's love rock guitars, some of the most storied instruments ever produced on Japanese soil, and guitars that fall under the colloquial lawsuit banner. This story takes us to the Tokai factory in Hamamatsu, Japan, tracking down the exact 1958 Gibson Les Paul Standard, responsible for over 40 years of Tokai's Gibson-style guitar output. But first things first, let's lay the legal groundwork of the lawsuit conundrum. Much has been said, both anecdotally and in well-researched publications, about how the Japanese approached making copies of the most popular USA-made guitar brands like Gibson and Fender. And while Tokai wasn't the target of any lawsuits in the golden age of these copies, the threat of legal action did loom large for Tokai's accurate and sometimes brazen branding. As such, for the sake of brevity and with a nod toward the last 40 plus years of guitar nomenclature, we'll refer to these Tokai instruments as lawsuit guitars, even though the only prominent lawsuit leveled at Japanese manufacturers for copyright infringement was related to Ibanez's parent company Hoshino and their distribution in the USA via the Elger Company. And while Ibanez had already transitioned away from a Gibson-style open book headstock, the central grievance of Gibson's lawsuit by 1976, the Gibson versus Elger lawsuit wasn't even filed until June of the following year and eventually settled out of court. Funnily enough, even though a precedent had been set for legal action, and even as Ibanez was moving away from Gibson-style instruments, Tokai was about to jump right in. And Tokai jumped in with gusto, not content to simply replicate the look of a Gibson instrument as Ibanez had done, but with the intention of replicating the most microscopic elements that made these late 50s USA-made guitars so revered, a reputation that was already well established by the late 1970s. We recently had the opportunity to travel to the Tokai factory in Hamamatsu, Japan, and we didn't know exactly what we'd find there, but we knew we had to go. We sat down with pivotal players in Tokai's guitar history and pored over their original reference libraries. And these included all of the original reference Polaroids of genuine USA-made guitars for all the models Tokai wanted to produce, including a circa 1957 Fender Mary Kay Stratocaster, which would be the template for the Springy Sound label Stratocasters, and one very special 1958 Gibson Les Paul Standard. To the best of our knowledge, these reference photos have never been seen or publicly shared, and they represent a unique insight into Tokai's research process and intent with the Love Rock models. It's almost without precedent to identify a single guitar, not a brand or model, but a specific serialized instrument that would ultimately be responsible for decades of guitar production. And with these reference Polaroids, we have just that. These photos included one key image of the back of this Les Paul's headstock showing serial number 86798. Unlike most guitars, where there's often some degree of discretion surrounding a serial number, 50s Les Paul bursts are the veritable Stradivarius of the 1950s, with serials that are exhaustively cataloged and publicly published. From Tokai's initial Les Paul Reborn branding to the quickly adopted Reborn Old logo to the eventual Love Rock branding, it was clear that Tokai wanted to both imitate and flatter while towing the line of legality. And as Masahiro Matsui, perhaps most pivotal architect of Tokai's electric guitars, imparted to us, Tokai's craftspeople measured every screw to create the perfect Les Paul. This statement bears out in their reference photography, with not only more global images of the guitars they were looking to replicate, but tiny details like the markings on the bridges and tailpieces, truss rod covers, and even the latches and handles on Gibson's Lifton-made hardshell cases. We will surely be digging into Tokai's Love Rocks deeper in future MIJ supplemental installments, parsing the specs of model tiers and component choices. There's so much to unpack here, and the lengths to which Tokai strove to be authentic and reverential to Gibson in their designs is truly fascinating. We appreciate you tuning in, and for more on our Tokai guitars and everything we have here at the Guitar Bar, please check out mmguitarbar.com, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more content.